we get it correct.
Yeah, and I'm correct in my understanding that the regulations are going to come into force early next year as well, aren't they?
Yes, in January.
Okay, so we'll await your update on that then, and we'll consider that in due course. Okay.
Sorry, just
go ahead.
on that then, just in terms of the suggested changes then. Obviously, once the hearings are complete, well, I was going to come on to this at the end, and I will do again. But once the hearings are complete, obviously we go into a process of obviously drafting. Obviously, in a lot of hearing sessions, we sort of said to you, it's your plan. You come up with the wording as to what needs to change, and that's fine. And we'll sort of go through that process, and then that will go out to consultation. There's obviously some aspects that we will need to take away and then provide you with recommendations on. So obviously SAP one's the obvious one, and then some of the sites that we've talked about where myself and Mr. Coyne needs to go and look in a bit more detail. Just in terms of this one then, do you think there are going to be fundamental changes to policy anyone or not? So obviously we can do that outside of the hearings, and we can agree the wording, because then it's ultimately subject to public consultation. If you remember back in week 1, I said if you want to speak to people outside of the hearings and sort of agree changes and then put them to us, that's beneficial, because then we don't go through 6 weeks of consultation for someone like a Natural England say, oh, you've got that wrong. So just in terms of anyone then, what do you think needs to change, and how best do you think it's going to be appropriate to do that?
Okay. Sorry. The changes are unlikely to be fundamental, because we do have to stick within the legal framework of the legislation. But yes, we could speak to people that have commented on the policy already, for example, including sort of key statutory stakeholders, make sure that they're satisfied with it. The key changes are ensuring it has some sort of local focus, so we can ensure that the biodiversity benefits are local, and which is, you know, it's going to be beneficial for overall enhancement.
Yeah, I think with this one, I think we're probably all in agreement that you know, obviously things are moving outside the local plan process in terms of, say, national level guidance and direction. I think, yeah, the key thing here is not getting into a position where we recommend some main mods and then we go through 6 weeks of consultation, and then someone says, oh yeah, that's wrong, or that's contrary to some national guidance or something like that. So I think, yes, it does need to be possibly updated, and that's what we talked about on day 1. I think in the first instance, we would certainly welcome, you know, the council speaking outside of the hearings. So let's say people have commented on this, HBF have made comments on this, for example, and, you know, Natural England or whoever else, and then bring some wording to us. It's just so we don't get to that position where we consult on something that we think's right, and then somebody tells us in the consultation it's wrong, because then that's really difficult then, because the only way of really remedying that is going through consultation again. So it's just quite important to maybe get it right in the first instance. So yeah, happy for you to take that one away and sort of come to us with some wording and sort of spend a bit of time. And it might be that you find with things like this, where things are sort of moving, it's like less is more point again. It might be that sometimes you just have to sort of say, well, you know, we've got this policy, yes, we want to do X, Y, and Z, but given that we'll be governed by, you know, national guidance on it, then maybe that's just where it has to go.
Yeah, that's
That
fine.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Thanks, Clive.
Great. Cheers, Matt. Okay. Mr. Johns, I see you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in on this point?
Yes, it was just my concern, I thought we were going to cover SP15 and we seem to have missed it.
We will do later on. That's under issue 2.
Okay, thank you.
So historic environment, yeah, so we'll come on to that after we finish issue 1. Okay. Ms. Wakeleaf, I see you've got your hand up as well.
Thank you kindly. On NE1, I do need to point out that I was at the CALC AGM, that's Kent Association of Local Councils. I listened to leader of KCC, Roger Goff, referring to a Kent-wide action being stepped up for a Kent-wide local nature recovery strategy. And of course, this has come up within Dover District in the last 6 months. And I also need to flag up that the Kent Nature Partnership has a commitment to 20% enhancement on biodiversity net gain to restore Kent's depleted natural capital and mitigate the 6th mass extinction. We feel that particularly given that the protection of promises or the fallback on promises is S106s, which of course can be, you know, people can apply to have them removed if the developer's concerned about profitability. Therefore, we feel that to become sound, effective and legally compliant, we would like an addition about enhancing biodiversity in line with Kent Nature Partnership commitment to 20% enhancement to restore Kent's depleted natural capital. I will put that in and see what happens.
Okay, thank you. From reading the plot, I think criterion C mentions the Kent local nature recovery strategy, I believe. In regards to the 20%, well, the guidance currently indicating that 10% is what would be required, but obviously that's going to be looked at in the round anyway, depending on what comes out in terms of the regulations, etc. The council want to add anything on those points?
Yes, 10% for now. So in the future we'll look at it again. It's a good idea to let this bed in and let local people and developers get to grips with it's quite complicated regulations.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sullivan, you've got your hand up as well. Have you got a point?
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to make a point about the difficulty maybe of achieving biodiversity net gain. I mean, I want to refer to the Redrow planning application again, 20-00419. This application promised a biodiversity net gain of 10%, but they only actually managed to, well, they claim that they are actually only going to manage 2.23% gain. And even this is going to be difficult to achieve because it's doubtful whether the mitigation proposals, which are part of the biodiversity net gain, which involve the recreation of open mosaic habitat and turtle dove habitat, will in fact achieve their goals. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay, I'll move on to question 4 then. So we asked something around this, the same question we've come on in a lot of sessions. You had it saying in accordance with the SPD, but I think you've suggested a change. Be informed by, I think, is that right in terms of the wording?
I think we've established over the last few weeks that you prefer have regard to.
Have regard to, yeah.
And we've also referred to potentially calling it supplementary planning guidance.
Yeah. Okay, fine. And then we've obviously touched on, you're going to have a look at policy NE1 in the round anyway, but there was a couple of suggested modifications, wasn't there? AM 105 and 106. So just briefly, why are they necessary?
Yes, I think we'll review those as part of our review of the new regulations. I don't think there's anything else we need to raise with you.
Okay, fine. Move on to question 6, if there's no other points from anyone on policy NE1. We'll move on to policy NE2 then. So we've got some suggested modifications to policy NE2 as well. So that's AM 107 and AM 108. You just briefly say why these changes are consistent with national policy, particularly paragraphs 176 and 177 of the framework. Thank you.
There are clarifications. AM 107, that's correcting the date. So we're updating the date of the AONB management plan. That's a comment from AONB unit.
Yeah.
And the next, sort of as part of the same AM 107, we're proposing to delete the reference to regionally important geological sites, and that was moved to a different part of the plan. Yes,
Yeah.
So that's just moving it.
Okay.
AM 108, that's really clarifying wording to ensure it's in line with the NPPF. So referring to the primary purpose of conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty. And at the end of that sentence, again, that's an NPPF reference. So the AONB should be, development should be limited in scale and extent. That's NPPF paragraph 176.
Okay, that's fine. That's making it more consistent with national policy.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Wakely, did you want to come in on this policy?
Thank you, and sorry for not turning my camera off earlier.
That's okay.
Yeah, I do want to say that on page 318, the landscape character definitions we regard as very constructive. We feel that the landscape character, both within the Kent Downs AONB and elsewhere, underpins our green tourism economy that needs to be protected, and which we've discussed on previous days. We feel that we would really be shooting ourselves in the foot as regards our local economy if that gets neglected in any way. So we are suggesting that we need to have somewhere this local plan would be unsound if it allows any development within the AONB or allows development over 5 dwellings within a mile of the boundaries of it. Food security being a key concern, and obviously what we're seeing there in the landscape character is how very important the horticultural belt is in the north of our district. But of course we've got, you know, when we describe something as arable land, that too is important in terms of food production. So for both economic and in terms of tourism and agriculture, this is really important and it really needs to be protected. Yeah, I rest my case.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else got any points on policy NE2? Okay. Yeah, before I move on to question 7, I think myself and my colleague had a bit of a question around policy NE3 and table 11.2 on page 320. I think in the previous session we discussed it, whether it should be deleted or updated, and we're just wondering if the council had any further thoughts on that.
I think from the council's perspective, we've suggested it should be deleted, and I think we would stand by that suggestion just to ensure that the plan remains, flexible. Obviously, we've already had to change and update the costs once, and we don't want the plan to come out of date as soon as it's been adopted. When we have to review, if we have to review these amounts that are required for the mitigation strategy, so that the council would rather that the table was deleted and the necessary changes were made to the policy to refer to the relevant documentation where those where the tariff amounts would be set out.
Okay.
Yeah, just on that then. So the tariff amounts, just remind me again where they're actually set out.
They're set out in the Thanet Coast and Sandwich Bay SAM document, which is NEB something. I'll just find the reference for you. 04A. So they are set out in there. So we'd need to make sure that the policy and the supporting text referred to it's the latest SAM. Basically, it would be probably it would need to refer to.
I just wonder whether there's a way in, because obviously you produce the plan with them in, and I take the point that they've changed, so therefore the plans are not effective, so therefore that policy needs to change in some way. The NPPF talks about developer contributions as well, and that has in, let me find the relevant bit, that sort of says that they need to be set out, doesn't it, in paragraph, 1 second. Yeah, 34 plans should set out the contributions expected from development. I'm just thinking out loud whether there's a way in which the council can still include them, update the table to refer to the most up-to-date amounts, but it could be worded in a way that if they were to change in the future, then people you wouldn't be stuck with these until having to update the plan. I take the point, because you don't want to update the plan every couple of years. I just wonder whether there could be a way in which table 11.2 was changed or updated in a way that said this is what it is now, so people know what's expected of them, and then if and as and when it does change, you're not tied by this, so people aren't saying, oh well, brilliant, we can just go back to the 2023 amount.
Yeah, that's fine. I think we can look at the wording to make sure it does that. That should be fine. We can have to think about that.
Yeah,
the table or subsequent latest SAM or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Townsend, did you want to make a point?
I thought you'd moved on to question 7, sir, and so I came in and you hadn't.
Okay. Yeah, well, we will be imminently. So I'll get. What was the point you wanted to make in terms of question 7 then? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, it's about NE4, air quality.
Okay.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, the plan relies on the WSP report for consideration of traffic on local roads. However, firstly, that report states that the Dover Deal transport model study area is its area of detailed modelling, and areas outside this, the more rural parts of the district, are modelled in considerably less detail. And secondly, mathematically, it's based on a network flow analysis, which considers the flow, traffic, into and out of nodes, junctions, with what flows out of one node going into adjoining nodes. It generally doesn't consider the links between nodes other than as treating them as pathways along which traffic flows. This means no consideration of these roads, no consideration of safety, no consideration of congestion, and so pollution. Some of these roads run through valleys which, in times of high pressure and so falling air and low winds, will trap and concentrate pollution. Furthermore, on local roads, some houses are adjacent to the carriageway. Now, the council employed consultants to model air quality, but there are a number of problems with their report. The council's had nearly 2 years to follow up on these, but doesn't appear to have done so. The report takes account of street canyons, but has no other mention of topography. This is a hilly district, and so it has valleys, which are also pollution traps, but they're not considered. It's based on the WSP data, and deficiencies in this I've just mentioned and were also highlighted last Wednesday. The consultant's report specifically mentions uncertainties associated with source activity data such as traffic flows. It also states that traffic data and speed estimates were checked to the extent possible, but doesn't say what this was. The study did consider one area of error, the multiple street canyons in Dover, but there are no mention of other possible areas. Again, rural roads have been neglected, and 2 extreme examples of this are firstly Alcombe, where no receptors modelled, and secondly Coxhill between the A2 and Shepherdswell, which was not modelled at all, and both of these are in valleys. For air quality outside of the big towns, there's been no monitoring to establish a baseline and thereby calibrate the modelling, nor modelling of the additional congestion brought on by development on roads, most of which only allow single track movement generally or in places. Some calibration in Dover showed initial model figures to underestimate by more than a factor of 5. Rurally, there's no means of calibrating the figures with the localities, so the figures deserve to be treated with considerable caution. The other quite separate concern is that PM2.5 has not been modelled at all, despite the report stating smaller PM have a greater likelihood of penetrating the respiratory tract and reaching the lung-to-blood interface and causing the health effect just described, which are increased risk of heart and lung diseases, and also that these may carry surface-absorbed carcinogens. The plan has no base data for rural areas. National figures worked on kilometre squares, which the consultant's report used, but these can't give the necessary detail for local topography or pollution from traffic. It uses modelling, which, to say the least, is very crude, and it doesn't model some significant places at all. And because of this, the plan doesn't justify development which would worsen air quality, because it doesn't have the data. And so it's not consistent with NPPF 185, which talks about taking account of the likely effects of, including cumulative effects, of pollution on health. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Townsend. I know we've discussed the WSP report, the data, the modelling, impact on the rural road network and traffic in previous sessions. But maybe just in terms of the air quality issue and impact on health, could the council maybe
it was the air quality, sir, that I particularly wanted to address. I was here for the session on the local road.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So if the council could respond on the air quality and health impact points, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, obviously the council does believe that the air quality assessment was had sufficient information and modelling to provide a good prediction. The receptors and the points at which the air quality was measured were carefully chosen by our consultants, air quality professionals. The outcome of the study was that it was a conclusion that the local plan is not predicted to significantly impact air quality or increase the number of receptors, and that's a key point for the progress of the local plan and meeting legal requirements, that it's not going to increase the impact on existing or new receptors arise. And the policy itself has been written to ensure that air quality and the impacts on receptors is considered when new planning applications are proposed.
Okay, what's the reference for that air quality report? Sorry, you're on mute, I think.
NEEB06.
6.
Yeah, I looked very hard for where the report used evidence of air quality, and the only evidence that I could find of measurements that they used were within the Dover Deal traffic area. I couldn't find any for any rural receptors at all. So we need to move away from the hypothetical of the model into the real world of measurements. And there aren't any that I could find for outside the Dover Deal area.
Okay.
There's a plan on page 20 of the report that shows the receptor locations, which covers some of the rural area as well.
Okay. Have a quick look. So is that the green dots?
I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand your question.
No, sorry, Mr. Townsend, I was directing that to council, sorry. No, in terms of the map that Ms. Taylor mentioned on page 20, so it's got existing receptors.
No measurement points.
Yeah, that's the map that shows the receptors on page
Page
20.
Yeah.
Yeah, the receptor points. Yeah.
But we need to look at
Yes.
where it was actually measured and not where it was calculated or modelled. And it's places, I'm saying, what places are there in rural areas which have actually been modelled? Actually been measured as opposed to modelled. Because it's those that we need to calibrate any of the readings in the modelling.
Okay. Does have any further points on that?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Townsend. Do the council want to come back on that?
We're just looking through the documents
okay,
here. But essentially, you know, the council has to ensure compliance with the air quality directive, and local authorities must assess their air quality objectives and submit an annual status report. So it's carefully monitored by the council, we recently completed one which we consulted on in June and July 2023, and that's been submitted. It was suited and it needs some modifications in terms of the way the report is laid out. So it hasn't been finally approved yet.
And the local plan evidence would draw on, you know, the council's annual monitoring that is carried out, and approved through those processes. So it focuses on the areas where there are potential issues in the local plan, evidence of withdrawals on that sort of annual requirement the council has under separate legislation to monitor air quality.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wakeleave, you've got your hand up for a while. Did you want to come in on either of these points, or was it a previous point?
I'll try and cover briefly a brief point about NE3, and then I'd like to come in and make a brief comment on NE4.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, about Thanet Coast Sandwich Bay SPA mitigation and monitoring strategy and the contribution rates. We have suggested that the contribution rate should be at least what is detailed on page 322, and that in some ways there is an argument for them to be double what is specified there. I'm hoping that the council will be able to assure that we're not talking about reducing them, and that they would, over the life of the local plan, be expected to rise possibly with inflation rates or possibly in line with average national house price increases. That is a brief point on the NE3, and of course that the money recovered thereby would need to be ring-fenced for projects to support wildlife of the Thanet Coast and Sandwich Bay SPA. Moving then on to the point that Mr. Townsend raises about air quality, I would thoroughly endorse the points he's raised and the points about hills and valleys and more dramatic climatic situations being something that will cause accumulation of pollution. I am mindful, of course, of the issue that DEFRA air quality guidelines, which are the legal ones for LPAs, are not as high as the World Health Organization guidelines regarding air pollution. But the ones that are legal in the UK are the DEFRA ones. And I'm also minded to point out that we need as much protection here as possible, having spoken to Professor Stephen Peckham of the University of Kent, particularly on the issue of particulate matter PMs, and therefore I would, we would thoroughly endorse what Mr. Townsend is saying about there needing to be measurements and protections in this area.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johns, have you got a point to make, or is that a legacy hand from earlier?
No, it's very much the same point as Mr. Townsend was raising, the issue of rural roads. And again, the Yorkham Valley Road, it's a very narrow, steep-sided valley with very significant increase in traffic and projected increase of traffic. And again, the NE4 clearly states cumulative effect of further emissions are arising from all of these developments. So there's been no real study or no real baseline at all of the impact of all of these additional vehicles through the ANOB, through the valley, which of course, by its steep sides, everything sits in the bottom. Yeah. That was the point I wanted to reinforce of Mr. Townsend's. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then I think we can move on to I think there's a proposed modification to policy NE4. Is that AM112? As we just run through that.
Yes, that's right. I believe this was in response to a Natural England comment.
Right.
So that's adding reference to minimising harm to habitats and species in there.
Okay. Yeah, fine. And then there's a couple of changes to policy NE5 as well, isn't there? So again, in relation to our question 7, so we've asked about the changes to NE4, 5 and 6. So you could run through AM113 113 and 114, please.
The NE5 change is a request from the Environment Agency.
Okay,
So it's a clarification really on the wording. It looks very
Okay.
similar, but it's it just
Yeah, so you-
tidies up the wording.
so you're removing a sentence at the end of paragraph 11.48, is that right?
Yes, I'm replacing
Yeah.
paragraph 11.51.
Okay.
That's about mains drainage and package treatment plants.
Right, and that's for similar reasons, just for clarity and effectiveness.
Yes, and that's agreed in the statement of common ground with the Environment Agency.
Okay.
You did
Okay.
propose an AM, but it's been updated in that statement of common ground. They weren't quite happy with the words.
Right. Okay, so the modification in the statement of common ground is slightly different to what's in the SD06.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Mhm.
I can't
So
see what the
it's good.
difference is right now, but it was a very minor change to the
difference.
words, and we'll clarify that for you.
Okay. And I'll look at that. Okay, fine. Yeah, if you could clarify that and just highlight what the minor differences are, that would be helpful.
I think just on
Okay.
that, I think there was a deletion of, there was a reference to requiring things to meet building regulations. I think.
Ah,
is
right,
that the
yeah.
change?
Yes, it was very
Yeah, yeah.
small. We didn't, yeah.
That'll be it then.
Yeah, I think in
Okay.
summary that those AM
Yeah.
113 and 114 subject to tweak. Yeah, fine. It comes from the statement of common ground with the Environment Agency, needed for
Yes.
effectiveness.
Yeah.
The one on AM 115 and policy NE6 probably isn't needed for soundness, because that reflects the conversation we had this morning around, the whole should and must. Do you go through the
Yeah.
plan and start changing every single reference to should to must? Do you miss one?
Be there for a while.
Probably-
Yeah.
it's not needed for effectiveness. The plan and the policies I read in their context and what they require someone to do. So unless you have any strong opinions on it, I don't think that that's actually needed. And actually, this was the point that Ms. Wakely made this morning, wasn't it, on another policy where we said it was probably fine as it stands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The council agree.
Yes, I think it was really to reflect the importance of this particular river to the district. It's a very rare example of a chalk river, and we did discuss it with the Environment Agency, and they have supported it in their hearing statement.
I think I take the point. I think what happens is if you go through the plan trying to make such changes and say, well, this is really important, so we'll change it to a must, you'll end up missing one, and then someone will say, oh, well, that's not important then, is it, because you haven't changed it from should to must, and then you'll be left in a situation somewhere else on something else, thinking, oh yeah, that's not as important when clearly it is. So I think to make that change, it would it's not necessary for effectiveness, and in doing so you might end up with an internal conflict or internal inconsistencies. So the fact it's got a policy, clearly it's important to the council. I think it probably goes far enough.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Yes, just for your information, it was responding to a comment from the Dover Society. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wakely, did you have a comment to make? You got your hand up.
Thank you kindly.
Yeah.
NE5, water supply and quality. In East Kent, there's been a considerable amount of discussion by communities on this issue of river contamination due to developments in East Kent, and the river contamination at Stourmouth and Stodmarsh on the northern edge, of course, of our district, and being caused by inadequate sewage infrastructure. And I'm wondering what has been done and whether that is an ongoing problem. And then I also need to flag up that we feel that it is essential that rainwater and greywater harvesting be a prerequisite on new homes, and obviously that shouldn't be weakened to any degree by any developer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johns, did you want to come in again?
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, the point here I was really picking up again on wastewater and going back to our discussions earlier last week on the developments in the catchment area of the River Stour. We're very much in the Orkham Valley are one of the big providers, the boreholes and everything else are in there. And manifestly, as we raised at the time, Southern Water do not have capacity within the sewage system, even to protect the existing amount coming through, hence the 5 tankers running 24/7. Yeah, and here we have a situation where we failed to put in the necessary infrastructure to cope with it. And yet we had a planning permission for 8 additional houses, which would put even more pressure on there. And really here, I'm just highlighting the point there, which I think is in point 41 in your reply. Yeah, it's essential that developers work with Southern Water to ensure that infrastructure is delivered in a timely manner. So, you know, here we haven't overloaded the system, and yet we have not insisted that this has been rectified before we build more houses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any final points on policies NE4, NE5 or NE6? No, okay, we can move on then to issue 2. So this is the historic environment. So we got policies SP15, HE1, HE2, HE3 and HE4. So I think we had a general question around the consistency of the policies in relation to conserving heritage assets in the framework. So could the council just give a bit of an overview of how the policies meet the tests and are consistent with national policy? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The historic environment is considered to be one of the district's most valuable assets, and we've got a very rich collection of both designated and non-designated heritage assets. So our approach with the policies and the local plan seeks to ensure that they are appropriately protected, both for their intrinsic heritage value and the benefits that they provide to the social and economic vitality of the district. The NPPF states that heritage assets should be conserved in a manner appropriate to their significance, and paragraph 190 sets out the requirement for a positive strategy to facilitate this. In 2013, we had the Dover District Heritage Strategy drafted and approved and adopted. This was reviewed and updated in 2020 as part of the process of the local plan review. That largely involved just ensuring that the references to the NPPF were correct. The main body of the heritage strategy and the recommendations within it are considered to continue to be appropriate. The heritage strategy has been submitted as document HEEB01, and in reference to the archaeological resource of Dover Town in particular, the additional evidence base for HE3 is the Dover Town Archaeological Characterisation, and that's been submitted as document HEEB02. As we've set out in our MIQs, we do consider that the policies are consistent with paragraphs 201 and 203 of the NPPF. The principles of those policies are addressed in, those paragraphs are set out, covered by policy HE1.
and the footnote to paragraph 201 in the NPPF is addressed in paragraph 12.25 of the supporting text to policy HE3. In that respect, in terms of the requirements of paragraph 200, we've set that out in the supporting text to policy HE1 in paragraph 2.5. And whilst we don't consider it to be a matter of soundness, if you feel that actually we should have that wording within the policy itself, we'd be very happy to agree this as a modification on your recommendation. Thank you.
Do you
Okay.
cover just on that then, H1? Do you cover the other scenarios with the NPPF? So obviously you've got less than substantial harm test. You've got total loss of significance or substantial harm test.
Sorry, Matthew. Sorry, Mr. Birkinshaw. Sorry.
Sorry.
We were on mute, so I'd silenced my laptop, so I couldn't actually hear the start of that. Would you just be able to start again? Sorry.
Sorry, yeah. The question was whether or not paragraph 12.5 should be supporting text or policy, I think is the question. It probably falls into that category of, if it's something the council wanted to see in the policy, we could find a way of saying it's needed for consistency with the framework. But equally, given that the framework is the sort of go-to on such matters, it's in national planning policy. That tells us we shouldn't really regurgitate and repeat things. Therefore, it's probably okay where it is. But equally, if you really felt strongly about it, I'm sure we could find a way of putting it in. So leave that.
We're happy with it. Really. Yeah, we're happy with it as it is, I think. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
fine.
Fine. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Johns, I know you wanted to talk about SP 15.
Yes, thank you, and obviously the conservation area. Again, I'm sorry, my theme comes back to the Orcombe Valley, but very much the centre of Orcombe Valley is Orcombe Village, which is a designated conservation area here, where we have 25 listed buildings, and of course, because of the nature of the development of the valley, most of it is alongside the Orcombe Valley Road. And I note in HE2 that one of the policy D, not to generate levels of traffic, parking or other environmental problems which would result in unacceptable harm to the character, appearance or significance of the area. Yeah. So my issue here is when we look at the valley, at the moment we have had the heritage officer out because we've had 4 of our listed buildings hit by HGVs, where they've unsuitably been coming up the valley and have actually knocked down ancient chalk walls and these issues. Obviously, the heritage officer's been there to make sure that they're rebuilt in the correct way. At the same time, we have 2 heritage buildings either side of the Valley Road. They're only 7 metres apart. And now with all the traffic and all the heavy weight of traffic that is coming through, especially HGVs, this is causing vibration, causing problems structurally and the rest. So really, again, I'm trying to pick out here proposals for the protection of these areas do not seem to be consistent across the planning document. It's again silos rather than the overall aspect of looking at things linearly. So these points there, really, I'd raise. We are now damaging our environment, which we say we want to protect, and we're not putting policies. We're not acting on policies in this area, in the other areas of the plan. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Points noted. Okay, then I know we've got a question around proposed changes to policies SP15, HE1 and HE4. So that's AM26, AM116, AM117, AM118. way of you could run through those, please, and just brief out loud and whether necessary. Thank you.
Yes. AM26. We need to make a change, an amendment. It's a factual change, and it is required for soundness. That's in respect of including text, ensuring that we've got historic parks and gardens as included on the Historic England's Register for historic parks and gardens. And also the number of records on the Kent Historic Environment record has increased somewhat. And also HE1, we've dealt with that, apologies. AM116, HE1, supporting text in 12.7 and 12.8. We're proposing to delete the text from those particular paragraphs and relocate them in the implementation section after the policy. It's just felt that that's actually a much more appropriate location for those paragraphs to be.
Okay, so that's just for effectiveness purposes.
HE1 policy, amending the second sentence of the policy. It's being proposed as an amendment by both KCC, Heritage and Historic England, and that's in reference to the Heritage at Risk Register. It's just that amendment that we've set out in the text, the strike through and the additional text that's been included underlined, that's all been agreed by Historic England in our statement of common grounds. We actually feel that's going to be necessary because it's going to be much more consistent with paragraph 190 of the NPPF. AM117, HE1, the implementation, paragraph 12.12, this is where we're placing the text that we've relocated from 12.7 and 12.8, and that's essentially for effectiveness of the policy. In AM118 policy HE4, this is it's not necessary for soundness, but it's literally just for clarification. We've just changed the reference to historic parks and gardens with lowercase. That just makes a differentiation between historic parks and gardens and registered parks and gardens. Those are the changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So those changes are necessary for improving the effectiveness of the policies and also making them more consistent with national policy. So in terms of AM118, that's more like a additional modification, I would say. Potentially. It's not a fundamental change to either the text or policy.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll have that as an AM. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any further comments on policy SB15, HE1, HE2, HE3 or HE4? Ms. Wakeleave, did you hand it up? Let me down again.
This is Trevor Johns again, just to
raise sorry, Mr. Johns, yeah, okay.
What I really can't understand here is in pretty well all of these documents, it's where a development causes an impact, yeah, then these will be looked at. But what we're seeing, and I can't see anywhere that it's covered, is where there are consequential effects, yeah, on decisions that are being made downstream. None of that seems to be taken into account, yeah. You know, we've talked about it with regard to, you know, the traffic issue, yeah, and I use that as an example. You know, the impacts of significant development actually ripple out across the whole district, yeah. They are affected in different ways, whether it's the environment, the historic environment, traffic, all of those things. But I don't see where there is responsibility within the council for addressing the consequential effects of all of these ripple effects.
Okay, thank you.
I know that's a wider question, but my problem is, in order for us to make our comments, we've had to come in on 7 different places to say essentially the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's the problem I found with this whole document. And equally, because there's no one person who can be seen as responsible for that, there's no way of pulling these horizontal threads through all of these silos. Yeah. So it's a wider question, but I'd like it considered. Thank you.
Okay, point taken. Yeah, I suppose that's part of the wider issue with local plans in general. They are big documents, lots of different elements. Sometimes it's hard for people to kind of look at it in the round and read the plan as a whole. But that's generally what is done when I guess the planning application stage. But point taken. I understand they're complex documents and there's a lot of different threads to it. So we have got your comments and your points, and we will take this into account.
It's the basis of the way forward for the next 5, 10, 15 years. So if we haven't got it right now, we're just going to exacerbate the problem.
Okay, point taken. Ms. Wakelee.
Thank you kindly. Yes, we are taking on board that attempts are being made to protect the historic environment. On HE3 and on ecology, we have a suggestion. I mean, because some of the things that we know about are known about, and some of them it's about protecting where we may make important archaeological discoveries in the future, because these are probable, and therefore and it's with this is an addition we are suggesting is needed for soundness and effectiveness because of the conversations we have with professional archaeologists. So the addition we are suggesting for HE3: proposals for development within the Liddon Valley Wantsum Channel, which make provision of appropriate archaeological and paleo-environmental investigation prior to development, will be supported. For the interest of clarity, the limits of the Liddon Valley, this is Liddon in the north, up bordering the Wantsum Channel, that archaeological paleo-environmental area of interest will be coterminous with the limits of the Environment Agency's flood risk map. Obviously, we are all aware that we live in an exciting archaeological area where the North Sea broke through into the English Channel 8,000 years ago, and it is highly probable that more discoveries will be made in that area. That's why we are suggesting and asking for this as an addition.
Okay, thank you. Presumably the policy would cover all areas across the district and would catch any development in the Liddon Valley anyway. The council have anything to add to that?
No, yeah, the issue is if we included specific reference here, we'd have to include specific reference to a lot of other important areas as well. So
okay, yeah. Okay, thank you. Any final points on these policies then from anyone? No. Okay, well, myself and my colleague Mr. Berkshire don't have any further questions on this issue, unless you've got one, Matt, have you?
Not on this one.
Okay.
But whilst we've got you, policy TI5, which is digital technology, did we look at this?
We did very briefly touch on it the other afternoon, but after our discussion yesterday that we had about CC1, we thought we might need to remove the reference to building regulations that we've suggested in the mod.
Yes, and there was also have a look at TI5 digital technology. So plan applications, community developments must be supported by a digital infrastructure statement. Just again, is that proportionate?
Yeah, we'll have a look at that in terms of
it's probably something that would just be covered by design access statement, really, isn't it? I assume. So it just goes back to that point we talked about in terms of sort of submission of documents versus what's expected of development proposals, really. I was just flicking through the plan to make sure that we've covered everything, because obviously this is the last session that we've got as a hearing session, and I think we've actually talked about every single policy. That was the only one that jumped out at me where we maybe didn't go through it in the same amount of detail, but I think everything else we've covered.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was there anything else from the council that you think we've not covered, or you wanted to ask us, that you wanted to raise in the hearings that you've not done so? Any other aspects of the plan?
We were gonna there's a few AMs, I think, but they're all consequential AMs in the appendices. I think they're probably all things which AMs we proposed the appendices, AM 119, but a lot of them are
Yeah.
consequential things or very
Yeah.
minor, but we can probably just make as AMs, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And we were also going to update you today on where we'd got to with the air quality work in relation to ammonia. And
Yes.
just to say that is still ongoing. Unfortunately, our air quality consultants have been unwell, so we were expecting the report to be finished last week, but it's not with us as yet. So we'll have to update you in writing on that early in the new year. Natural England are on hand to look at the report as soon as it's available early in the new year, and then we will update you in writing, if that's okay, as soon as we can.
Yeah, because the position has always been that Natural England didn't have any fundamental concerns. I think it was just a lack of evidential basis, really, and they just wanted that sort of boxed off. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, until they've seen the final report, they can't confirm for definite. But you know, based upon the information they've seen so far, it's not looking like there's going to be any major issues or anything that can't be easily addressed. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So just in terms of that point, then, would that lead to a HRA update or addendum that would be needed?
Yeah, so we were proposing to update the HRA, and I think we discussed this on day one, didn't we, whether or not we do that alongside a main modifications, alongside any update needed associated with main modifications. We will probably, I think, in order to satisfy Natural England, we will sort of update the HRA in advance of that part of it is necessary to ensure that we've dealt with all that bit appropriately. So we can share a draft if necessary alongside the air quality work and naturally an update to the Statement of Common Ground with Natural England as soon as we can.
I think that's right. Obviously, we're at sort of mid-December now. Obviously, Clive and I, Mr. Coyne and I, need to go and look at a lot of the sites and issues anyway, and then sort of report back on some of those where we sort of said, well, look, we need to go and have a look at it. So that's obviously going to be into January when we get a chance to go and look at those sites. So there's a bit of time there when we'll have to go and look at them and then come back to you on any main mods that might be needed and any main mods that might be needed on SAP1 as well. Because you said we'd sort of, we can't give you sort of verbal updates as to what's needed on that because there's quite a lot of moving parts. So we'll do that. So in that sort of 2 to 3 weeks after Christmas, if you want to be getting on with getting that finalised, getting any comments from Natural England, and then just submitting them through Louise, the programme officer, they can be added to the website. And then yes, you're right, the main mods will then need obviously the schedule of main modifications, the schedule of additional modifications. Whilst they're not before us, sometimes it's useful to just, for your own mind, Ray, to say set those out. Schedule of changes to the policies map, so sort of before and after. A sustainability appraisal of the main mods and a habitat regulation assessment of the main mods, although they tend to be sort of, here's the schedule, not every main mod's going to need essaying, clearly. But there's sort of the suite of documents that you'll need. Have I missed anything?
There is just one thing that we were meant to raise today in relation to NE6. We just recalled in the policy. This is Riverdower. In the policy, it refers to Riverside Walk shown on the policies map, and we've realised it's not actually currently shown on the policies map. So we will need to add that to the list of changes to the policies map.
Yeah,
it's part of it is shown on it's the town centre strategy map under the Dover Town Centre policy, but it's not the full extent of it. So that's an omission from the policies map currently.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. And that's a classic example of why it sits outside of the main mods, because obviously you can do things like that and add things to the policies map. So yeah, just include that within the document as sort of before and after. Any other matters arising?
Oh, just in terms of sort of our other actions that have come out of the hearings, just to update you on timescales, we're likely to be able to get the majority of them to you before Christmas. Yeah, just give you that update, but we'll obviously liaise through the programme officer. Yeah, that's fine. And just in terms of the sort of I'll call them the non-contentious. I know that they're certainly not important, but in terms of the lot of the other main mods, is obviously start work on those, start work drafting them up, and then just send them across, and we can just say that's what we meant, or no, it needs to do this X, Y, and Z. We will send you through the programme officer maybe a template for the main modifications, because then that's ultimately what will be consulted upon. So we can send you a template for that. So there's probably quite a lot of just rejigging and cutting and pasting and sort of tidying up to do. Say we will get out as soon as we can after Christmas and go and look at these sites and look at some of the issues that have been raised, and then feedback to the council. And then sort of mopping up any other actions and notes and things like that that have arisen. And then just sort of getting the main modifications into a sort of position that can be consulted on, getting the HRA addendum done, the SA addendum done, and then out to consultation. Really, it's a sort of very brief summary of the next steps. But obviously, if you've got any questions or queries, then just please get in touch through the programme officer. Really. But other than that, just let me say thank you, really. Obviously, thank you to the council and the officers. I know that there's been lots of questions and lots of MIQs, and we've gone through a lot of detail. And certainly, I know that the feedback that the Louise, the programme officers, had has been that that's been well received from people. I know they've sort of been in touch to say thank you for that. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. I know there's been some long days, where we've sat there until gone 5 o'clock, but we really do appreciate that, and it means that the examination can stick to the timetable, and that goes for other participants as well. I know that 7 of you here today have been at pretty much nearly every session and offered some really useful input into that. So we sort of thank everyone for their time and input and commitment to it, really. Yeah, I think we'd just like to reiterate that from the council's perspective as well, in terms of yourselves and also all the participants. Thank you.
Very good. Louise, was there anything from yourself? If you're still there, have we missed anything that we need to raise at this point?
I am still here, and no, there's nothing I think that needs raising at the moment. Yeah.
Mr. Johns, you've got your hand up. Is there anything to add?
Yeah, it was really just a question for those of us that have submitted perspectives and added. How do we see the results of that come through? I understand it's between yourselves and the council for the majority of it, but how would we be integrated into the sort of that feedback loop?
Yeah, no, definitely. The ultimate outcome of the local plan process is that we write a final report which goes to the council. So we write a report and recommendation. So that report is written by ourselves, and that goes to council, and that says it ultimately says there's one of three outcomes. There's either outcome one, which is you may adopt your plan and make no changes to it. That's unheard of. I don't think that's ever been the case. There's always changes to plans. And obviously, we've talked about some throughout every session. Option two is, yes, you can adopt your plan subject to these changes. And then there's a schedule that says, policy NE6, just it's open in front of me, you must change it to say this. Or the third outcome of a local plan examination is no, you cannot adopt your plan, and no, it cannot be changed because there's so many things fundamentally wrong with it. But that tends to be around failings on legal requirements like the duty to cooperate and things like that, which can't be rectified. So ultimately, the report goes to the council. It will say you need to do A, B, C, X, Y, and Z in order to adopt your plan. And that's a publicly available report that goes to the local planning authority. That's added to the examination website. Everyone can see that. And then usually what councils do, I don't know what happens in Dover, but councils will often go through committee cycles, and it will need to go to a cabinet or a full council or something like that, where there's a recommendation made to, ultimately by the council, a recommendation made whether or not to adopt the local plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing the documents in due course.
As I said on other days, so in terms of the changes to the plan, the main modifications, they are subject to full public consultation. So obviously, Mr. Johns and other people that have been participating will be notified in due course, and everyone gets an opportunity to comment on those changes. Any other questions? No. Okay, well, thank you all for your time, everybody. Hope you have a good Christmas, and yeah, we'll be in touch in the new year with regard to just those outstanding matters.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.